and welcome to my video on do-it-yourself helpful projects for the Celestrons CGX mount. Okay, let's start with the tripod. I've removed the tray, or the spreader as they call it, because it was a good idea when they designed it to keep the spreader on there, but it doesn't make for good storage, or when you're putting it in your vehicle it takes up a lot more room. So I've removed mine, and I'll show you why. My goal was to make a shelf for the spreader to sit on, and what I did, I mounted the spreader with the flat side facing the bottom of the shelf and drilled a hole on each side and put a wire tie, and the same with here. And I had to cut out these curves for the tripod legs on each one. And then these boards are just for support because it's a 1/4 inch piece of plywood, which is not real strong. And it's 15 inches wide and 2 foot long. And then this is the top part. And then you'd also have to cut out this circle for the center of the spreader, and then center it in there, and then here's the wire ties that actually hold it. So I'll mount it now and show you what it looks like. Well, let's go ahead and mount the shelf to the tripod. And when you set it up, this direction would be north, so that we're going to set up the shelf in this manner here. So it goes through there, and what I did, I made a spacer so there's not as many threads that you'll have to put the nut on up to. So this is 3 inches long. It's a 1/2 inch piece of PVC, and it goes over the threaded rod, and then the nut goes on top of that. And then just torque it down till it's very snug. And it's as simple as that. Now you notice also that I put on these edges of the piece of wood. These are to keep your lenses or whatever else from rolling off, because I didn't want to drill holes into this to put lenses, because I hardly ever use it that way. The next step in the assembly process that I created to speed up the process, as you know, this is the bolt that comes with the unit. It connects the mount to the tripod through these threaded holes. But you could easily lose these washers. So what I did is made a spacer out of a 3/8 diameter PVC pipe that's 1/2 inch long, slide that onto the bolt, and then I put electrical tape around it. So this is one that's already finished, and it also makes a good grip so that you can thread it in by hand most of the way. And then you've got to get one of these, a T-wrench that fits this hex bolt. Yes, they give you an Allen wrench that comes with the mount, but this is so much better because you can just twist the thing in real fast like that. So I'll show you that when I assemble the thing. Also, I drilled holes in the back part of this platform tray where I could keep these bolts so they don't get lost. So the perfect size hole that holds them pretty tight. And then this slides right in here, so it's always available, nice and tight. And then this I mounted with a level on it so that I could just level the mount when I go to set it up and put it in different positions, and then store the level right here where I can't lose it, and it's always with me. So now on to the next part about mounting the mount itself. Okay, so let's say you're at your dark sky site now, so you have to polar align it. So I put the mount so that this one leg points north. Now to find north, I use a high quality compass such as this one to find north, and I know true north is like 3 degrees off, so I kind of compensate for that by putting the front leg 3 degrees different from that. Then it's pretty well polar aligned to begin with before we even put on the mount and all the extra weight. We got to get the tripod in the pretty close to that right position. So remember, the goal for all these tricks is to shorten the time that it takes to set up the mount and the scope in the field, so you can have more time for observing or imaging. So with these bolts here, which are the mounting bolts for the whole mount, and this is what you loosen to do the polar alignment, I found you can leave these bolts not loose, of course, but just tight enough so you can adjust the mount, and then leave them that loose. So you'd adjust it by turning this, and that moves the whole mount for the azimuth. But if you leave them that loose, it does not affect the performance at all. So that helps to speed up the time. So I don't use a wrench or anything, I just go ahead and adjust it when I do my polar alignment. And since I use the same telescope all the time, and I only change lenses, or I use bino viewers, or use my camera, or maybe a guide scope and camera, all of these will throw off the balance of the scope and the mount. So I did my balancing of each different item at home. And I put these marks on the counterweight shaft, if you can see them, with the black marker, showing where to put each mount according to what's on the scope, whether that's the camera or the heavy lens, or so I don't have to do a balance check each time, because I put the mount according to these marks every time I use it. And then next I put these white pieces of gaffer's tape, and I put these marks on it, so when I do a balance check, I can always return it to its home position without the mount being on. And the same with this one here for the declination, so I can turn the mount, unbalance it, and then put it right back where it belongs. So that way you speed up the process too, so it doesn't have to find home and you have to start all over again. So that helps a lot, but the gaffer's tape doesn't stick or ruin the metal either. So just draw pencil lines to line up the two marks when you're ready for that. Okay, this is the front of the mount. Under this handle, as you know, is the round plate with 4 screws on it, where a polar scope would normally go. So what I did, I replaced these 2 screws with longer screws, the 6mm threads, and I attached this piece of wood, which I also cut a hole in so I could put a star diagonal in it, and then I put this cap on it with a dot in the center, a hole in the center. So when you view through this side piece, you could actually see Polaris and line up the scope for a polar alignment that way. This has to be, of course, when it's dark and you can see Polaris. Now I'll get to the other part where how I do an alignment also. So before I put on the telescope and the weights, I do one last test in the dark to make sure that I'm polar aligned. So what I use now is a laser beam, the green laser. So what I do is take it and lay it right perpendicular to the mount head itself. And now when I turn on the laser, it should point very, very close to Polaris. And that gives me the final test that I am pretty close to alignment. Now after that, then I'll mount the weight and the telescope and do the final alignment, star alignments, and a polar alignment. Okay, I have the mount just sitting on the tripod right now, so I'll go ahead and bolt it in with the bolts that I told you about. The first one would go here in the front. You can just thread it by hand. Then the other one would go on this side here. All right, just get them finger tight for right now. Then I'll take my wrench, which I forgot to tell you is an 8mm hex wrench, and just tighten that down. And I found that you only need 2 of the bolts because it does not move at all with just the 2 on it. Then I would put the counterweights on the shaft according to the marks, depending on what particular things I have on the telescope itself. But since I'm just mounting the scope and the lens, that's where it would be set. So now I'll put the telescope on. This is the telescope I use for imaging. It's the Orion 8-inch Newtonian astrograph, and it weighs 17 pounds, and then with all the accessories about 23 pounds, but the CGX mount handles it terrifically. Wanted to notice the one thing I added to this was this plate, mounting plate. This is the dovetail bar that came with the mount, compared to this one, the 4-inch, which sits in the saddle of the CGX very, very nicely. It gives a lot more stability. So I definitely went ahead and got that one. So now let's mount the telescope to the mount and see how that goes. Alright, let me grab the scope and I'll put it on. And again, this wide plate helps a lot because it just sits right in there and it's balanced nice. Notice I put gaffer's tape on here too to line up the marks according to what's in there. Now it's already balanced because I just line up the mark. But if I have extra weights in, then I would line it up to this mark. And just tighten these down and we're all set to go. Alright, this is my telescope all set up, and what I use is the 20mm illuminated radical so that when I do my star alignments I can pinpoint the star exactly in the center of the lens, and that gives a very accurate alignment. Now this motor here is part of the Orion AccuFocus unit, but this is the way I set this thing up, because what I do is I operate the telescope, my focuser, and my camera from a remote site, well, about 25 feet away, on my laptop, so everything gets run that way. So to connect these two, I came across this. It's like a rubber band, but I think that kids use it for a bracelet, but it works perfect this way. So I put it on this fine focuser, thread it through there, slip this down, and now I can operate the focuser, which does a very fine job of focusing. It's very smooth, and you get pinpoint stars when you take your time and do it. But this is nice because it's a 25-foot extension cord, so I can run it rather far away. Alright, lastly I'd like to show you a few things that I do. First of all, the power cord. When you're in a dark spot, you know people are going to trip over the power cords or any other cord you have. So when I connect to the computer, I use a white USB cable. And my power cord, I painted it white in certain spots. You know, it's not a good job, but now you can see the cord in the dark. Last thing, okay, where do I put this? Because the mount that they give you is way down here. So what I did, I connected some Velcro to the back of this and also a piece up here. So when after I do some alignments or a go-to, I just can stick it right there and it's out of the way, but it's also very handy. So that concludes all these do-it-yourself projects. I hope they helped you a lot, and some of them you might even use. So thank you, and clear skies.